Modern life has a silent trap. We are constantly pushed to do more, achieve more, accumulate more. Yet somehow, we end up feeling less grounded, less fulfilled, less present. Everything around us seems to accelerate. Information, expectations, ambitions. It's as if we're always late for something undefined, something invisible. So we run, we chase. We don't even ask why anymore, because the world tells us that slowing down is failure. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Chasing easily becomes an addiction. The moment one goal is reached, the next one appears. The satisfaction window gets shorter every time, until achievements stop meaning anything at all. Because the problem isn't the goal, it's the compulsive momentum. When you don't create space to think, to breathe, to feel, the world fills that space with noise, with comparison, with pressure, with everything except what you truly want. Becoming more is not the same as doing more. Growth is not a marathon, it's alignment. It's choosing deliberately instead of reacting automatically. Doing less isn't laziness, it's refinement. It's the act of cutting away the unnecessary so the essential can finally breathe. The power of doing less is subtle but profound. Stillness creates clarity. Slowing down lets your inner voice emerge from beneath the layers of expectation. When you stop chasing everything, you can finally notice what was quietly calling you all along. Sometimes the courage you need is not the courage to push harder, but the courage to pause long enough to question the direction you're heading. Maybe the real progress you've been seeking doesn't come from acceleration, but from alignment. Maybe less is the doorway to depth, and depth is what turns ordinary life into meaningful life. So here's the question I'll leave you with at the end of this first section. If you stopped chasing today, what would truly collapse in your life? And how many of those things are actually worth holding up? You might discover that most of the weight you're carrying isn't necessary. It's just noise. And the first step toward becoming more is removing what keeps you from hearing yourself. The world romanticizes hustle. It glorifies the person who sleeps less, grinds more, and fills every minute with activity. But what almost no one talks about is the invisible cost of this lifestyle, the erosion of your inner world. Constant motion numbs you. It steals your capacity to reflect, to feel, to question. You become efficient, yes, but only at performing routines that may not even matter. Here's the irony. The more you chase, the more life becomes a blur. The faster you run, the less you actually experience. When everything is urgent, nothing is meaningful. People confuse movement with progress, but a hamster wheel also moves. A ship lost at sea also moves. Noise can feel like momentum, but it leads nowhere. And maybe that's why so many people feel empty despite being busy, because busyness often masks a deeper truth. We are afraid of what silence might reveal. In silence, you can't hide from the questions you've avoided. Questions like, is this really the life I want? Who am I doing this for? Where is this path actually leading? These questions are uncomfortable, so people keep running. But avoidance has a cost. When you never pause, you lose the ability to discern. You lose the ability to choose. Life becomes something that happens to you, not something you shape. Doing less is not about withdrawing from the world. It is about withdrawing from illusion. It is the act of reclaiming your attention from everything that never deserved it. It is learning to recognize the difference between urgency and importance. When you slow down, you start seeing the patterns, the tasks that drain you, the habits that sabotage you, the goals that were never yours to begin with. This awareness is the beginning of freedom, because you cannot redirect your life until you first recognize where your energy is being wasted. So the real question becomes, what would your life look like if you stopped spending effort where effort has no return? Not in terms of productivity, but in terms of peace, depth, and meaning. Doing less is simply the removal of what keeps you from yourself. Most people try to improve their lives through addition. Add new habits, add new goals, add new responsibilities, add more pressure, more expectations, more noise. But the mind does not expand through accumulation. It expands through subtraction. Think of a sculptor. They do not create a masterpiece by adding clay endlessly. They remove what does not belong. They carve away anything that hides the form within. That is what doing less really is. The art of uncovering yourself. Not building a new identity on top of old patterns, but clearing away the layers that suffocate your clarity. When you remove distractions, you don't lose your life, you finally see it. And this is where transformation begins. Because once the unnecessary is stripped away, something interesting happens. Your attention becomes powerful. Your actions gain weight. Your time becomes meaningful again. Life starts to feel less like a battlefield and more like a landscape you can actually navigate. You begin choosing with intention rather than reacting out of habit. And choices made from clarity have a different kind of force. They create momentum that isn't frantic but focused. Here's the part most people overlook. You cannot become more unless you release who you are no longer meant to be. Old goals, old fears, old versions of yourself, they all take up space. And as long as that space is occupied, growth has nowhere to land. Doing less opens the door for depth. Depth opens the door for mastery. And mastery opens the door for meaning. In this space of intentional emptiness, you rediscover things you once lost. The ability to feel excitement without pressure. The ability to rest without guilt. The ability to think without noise crushing every thought. The world encourages you to fill every moment, but your potential lives in the moments you leave unfilled. Stillness is not stagnation, it is incubation. It is the quiet place where ideas mature, where identity forms, where direction becomes visible. So ask yourself honestly, what are you holding on to that no longer expands you? A dream that isn't yours, a pace that isn't sustainable, a life that isn't aligned. Every unnecessary commitment you drop is not a loss. It is the return of your energy, your time, your clarity, yourself. Doing less is not about shrinking your life. It's about growing into the life that actually fits you. We live in a culture that tells us value comes from productivity, from output, from visible achievement, from how much you can carry without breaking. But genuine growth doesn't happen under constant pressure. It happens in presence when your mind is not scattered across 1,000 unfinished tasks, but grounded in the moment you're actually living. Pressure speeds you up, but presence strengthens you. And the strongest version of yourself is not the one running the fastest, but the one able to stand still with clarity. Becoming more is often misunderstood. It's not about evolving into a larger, louder, busier version of yourself. It's not about building a life so full that there's no space left to breathe. Becoming more means becoming truer, aligning your actions with the core of who you are, instead of who the world expects you to be. When you let go of unnecessary pressure, you start noticing subtle but powerful shifts. You speak with more intention because you're no longer rushing. You think more clearly because your mind isn't drowning in noise. You connect more deeply because you're actually present in the moment instead of chasing the next one. And these small shifts add up, not in a dramatic, overnight transformation way, but quietly, steadily, like roots deepening under the soil unseen, but essential. Here's the paradox. When you stop trying to become more, you naturally grow. Why? Because growth is the natural consequence of alignment, not effort. A tree doesn't force itself upward. It grows because nothing is blocking its roots. Similarly, you don't need more discipline, motivation, or intensity. You need fewer internal obstacles, fewer distractions, fewer contradictions between what you say you want and what you actually do. Presence reveals these contradictions. Pressure hides them. When you slow down, you notice where your energy leaks, where your boundaries collapse, where you say yes when your whole body means no. And once you see these patterns, you can finally choose differently. So ask yourself, what if becoming more is not about upgrading your life, but about uncluttering your inner world? What if the version of you that feels not enough is simply buried under too much noise? Doing less is not about abandoning ambition. It's about removing everything that distorts it. Because only a quiet mind can recognize a meaningful direction. There comes a moment in every person's life when the endless chase feels hollow, when achievements fail to fill the silence inside, when speed stops feeling like progress and starts feeling like escape. If you're listening closely, that moment is not a sign of failure, it's an invitation. An invitation to return to the essential self buried underneath years of noise, pressure, and expectation. Doing less is not merely a productivity strategy. It is an act of reclaiming your life. It is a quiet rebellion against a world that profits from your distraction. It is choosing to live intentionally rather than reactively. The truth is simple. You cannot build a meaningful life on top of chaos. Depth requires space. Purpose requires clarity. Growth requires stillness. When you remove what drains you, what remains is not emptiness, it is possibility. The possibility to redirect your energy towards something that actually expands you. The possibility to build a life that feels aligned, not forced. The possibility to grow at a pace that is sustainable and human. And here is the part most people never realize. Doing less doesn't shrink your world. It reveals the parts worth growing. When you stop chasing everything, you finally see what truly matters. A meaningful relationship. An idea that lights you up. A practice that grounds you. A direction that feels like yours. Not inherited, not imitated, but chosen. Life becomes lighter. Not because it becomes easier, but because you stop carrying what was never meant for you. At the end of this journey, the question is no longer, how can I do more? The real question becomes, who am I when I stop chasing? Are you someone defined by pressure, by comparison, by expectations? Or are you someone capable of choosing depth over noise, intention over momentum, presence over performance? Doing less is an opening. Becoming more is what flows into that opening. So if you take one message from this entire exploration, let it be this. You were never meant to outrun life. You were meant to meet it with clarity, with purpose, and with enough stillness to actually experience it. Stop chasing. Start becoming.